The entire history of this beautiful sport, it essentially rests on the absolute edge of a knife. Seriously, we look back at the final score lines, we watch the highlight reels of lifted trophies, we study these legendary careers, and we just kind of accept them as destiny. Like it was always meant to be written that way. But the terrifying truth, the reality of the game, it's all built on a fragile, wildly unpredictable foundation. We're talking about a foundation of missed penalties, failed medicals, sudden catastrophic injuries, and literal split-second decisions. The legacy of the world's greatest clubs, the absolute mythos of its greatest players, they are completely, 100% at the mercy of chance. Just think about it. One tiny change, right? One slightly different bounce of the ball off the crossbar. One mistimed tackle by a fraction of a second, and the entire football landscape as we know it completely transforms. Literally overnight. The heroes we worship, they become the villains. The absolute legends just turn into footnotes in a history book. And those massive dynasties we revere today, they never even get off the ground. So, I have a question for you. What if one single moment changed absolutely everything? Today, in this explainer, we are literally tearing up the record books. We're going to explore the alternate timelines that almost happened. We are diving deep into the massive tactical shifts that never were, the legendary goals that missed by a literal inch, and the monumental blockbuster transfers that completely fell apart at the 11th hour. These are the insane butterfly effects that would have rewritten everything you thought you knew about the game. But okay, before we look at the chaotic split-second moments on the pitch, we actually have to start with the most unpredictable, volatile variable in the entire sport, and that is the human mind. Section 1. The burden of talent. See, physical ability is truly only half the battle when a player is trying to cement a spot on a world-class roster. You could literally have the fastest sprint speed in the entire league. You could possess the most lethal, jaw-dropping shot from outside the box. You could even have that innate, dazzling ability to just effortlessly dribble past an entire defensive line like they aren't even there. But if the mindset isn't there, if the absolute obsessive drive is missing, it simply doesn't matter. Sir Alex Ferguson, one of the greatest minds to ever touch the game, famously said, "Hard work will always overcome natural talent when natural talent does not work hard enough." And honestly, he hit the nail right on the head. The football world is absolutely littered with prodigies who had the entire world at their feet. I mean, players who seemed undeniably destined to eclipse the all-time greats, but were inevitably derailed. Sometimes, yeah, it was a devastating lack of discipline, but other times, it was absolutely devastating human tragedies that took the decision entirely out of their hands. Section 2. Tragic Injuries and Fallen Kings. Let's look at two of the most heartbreaking what-ifs in the entire history of the sport. Flashback to the late 1990s. There was simply no player on planet Earth quite like Ronaldo Nazário. Oh, Fenomeno. As a teenager playing for PSV Eindhoven and then Barcelona, R9 was posting numbers that had only ever been surpassed by Pelé. We are talking about 47 goals in 49 games for Barcelona at just 20 years old. Think about how insane that is. He was out there humiliating world-class veteran defenders, blending this sheer, unstoppable physical power with blinding stepovers. He was a glitch in the matrix. But then, cruel, catastrophic knee injuries derailed his meteoric rise. His own body betrayed him, robbing us of his explosive, terrifying pace. Now I want you to imagine an alternate reality where those knees just hold up, where R9 stays fully healthy. A fully fit Ronaldo likely dominates the early to mid-2000s entirely. Real Madrid might not have ever suffered their agonizing 12-year Champions League drought. And when it comes to the all-time GOAT rankings, an unhindered R9 easily, and I mean easily, sits above Zinedine Zidane and Ronaldinho. He'd probably be looking right down on Lionel Messi and Pelé, completely owning the absolute top spot. And the tragedy for Brazil didn't stop there, because just as Ronaldo's absolute peak began to wane, Brazil produced his undeniable heir. Enter Adriano, l'imperatore, the emperor. Seriously, he had every single terrifying aspect of Ronaldo's game. He had the jaw-dropping skill, the lightning pace, and a left foot that fired like a literal shotgun. I mean, you didn't want to be in the way of his shot. He was destined to rule world football at Inter Milan, completely and utterly bullying elite Italian defenders weekend after weekend. He was a force of nature. But then, absolute disaster struck. And it wasn't an injury. It was the sudden, heartbreaking death of his father when Adriano was just 22 years old. That loss sent him into a profound, incredibly dark depressive spiral that he simply could not escape. Alcohol and immense weight issues started to take over, but they were just masking a deep, unresolvable psychological pain. His former Inter Milan captain, Javier Zanetti, looked back on Adriano's rapid decline and literally called it the biggest defeat of his own career. That is how deeply this personal tragedy impacted the entire locker room. It's a beautifully tragic reminder that these seemingly invincible superstars, these guys we treat like actual gods on the pitch, they are vulnerable human beings first. Section 3. Sliding doors and missed shots. All right, let's pick up the pace and pivot back to the field itself. Let's talk about the mind-bending, split-second moments that irrevocably altered football history. Picture this. It's the Euro 2008 quarterfinals, Italy versus Spain. The tension is suffocating, and it goes to a nerve-wracking penalty shootout. Now, in our reality, Spain wins that shootout, and that exact moment launches an unprecedented, unbelievable dynasty of international dominance, cementing the tiki-taka style globally for the next decade. But what if we change one thing? What if the legendary Italian keeper, Gianluigi Buffon, manages to save Cesc Fabregas's penalty? Just like that, the timeline shatters. Spain is stuck in a brutal trophy drought, the media turns on them, they perhaps ditch tiki-taka altogether before it even reaches its peak because it couldn't win the big games. Italy, who were the reigning World Cup champions at the time, likely goes on to win those Euros, asserting total dominance. And here's the craziest ripple effect of all. Think about this. If Italian football reclaims its absolute European dominance, a young Cristiano Ronaldo who was looking to leave Manchester United in 2009 might have opted for the massive prestige of Serie A instead of moving to Real Madrid. If he goes to Italy, the legendary era-defining Messi-Ronaldo La Liga rivalry as we know it, the battles in El Clasico, it might never, ever have happened. Let's flash forward to a much more recent butterfly effect, the 120th minute of the 2022 World Cup final, Argentina versus France. The score is deadlocked at 3-3. The players are out on their feet. There are barely 30 seconds left in extra time. A hopeful ball drops over the top, and suddenly France's Kolo Muani finds himself completely one-on-one with Emiliano Martinez. The margin right here, it is incredibly, painfully razor-thin. It's the defining moment of a generation. In our timeline, Martinez extends his leg, pulling off a legendary, physics-defying save. Argentina goes on to win on penalties, and Lionel Messi is universally crowned the undeniable GOAT, finally completing his perfect storybook ending. But what if Muani's shot is just 1 inch to the right? What if it goes in? France wins 4-3. Suddenly, Kylian Mbappe, having just scored a hat-trick in a World Cup final win, becomes the undisputed, unrivaled new king of football at just 23 years old. Messi, devastated, walks off the pitch without a World Cup. His legacy, fairly or not, feels forever incomplete. And that entire GOAT debate, it shifts drastically against him overnight. All of that history, all of that legacy, decided by one frantic swing of a boot. Now I want to show you a number, 1,281. That is the widely reported career goal count of the absolute icon, Pelé. He won 3 World Cups, a historic, unbelievable feat that literally no one else has ever matched. But here's the massive historical what-if with Pelé. He spent almost his entire career playing domestically in Brazil for Santos. Why didn't he test himself in Europe like every modern great? Because the Brazilian government quite literally declared him an official national treasure. They created a law to legally block massive European clubs from ever being able to buy him. They kept him at home. But what if he hadn't been restricted by lawmakers? What if Pelé actually moved to Europe in the late 1960s? Imagine him facing the brutal, bone-crunching, take-no-prisoners defenders of Italy's Serie A, or dealing with the intense, hyper-competitive tactical setups of La Liga. If he went over there, dominated Europe, scored at the exact same ridiculous rate, and won multiple European Cups, my goodness. The debate between him, Messi, and Ronaldo wouldn't even be a debate today. It would just be unanimously Pelé, completely cementing him as the undisputed greatest in absolutely every corner of the globe. So let's contrast that historical butterfly effect with a massive, very modern one, $173 million. That is the astronomical, frankly unbelievable annual salary that the Saudi Pro League offered Cristiano Ronaldo. This was right after his explosive, bridge-burning, controversial exit from Manchester United in late 2022. But play along with me here. What if that absurdly lucrative Saudi mega money never existed? Where does a 37-year-old CR7, a guy with absolutely massive wage demands and, let's be real, an equally massive ego, actually go? What are his options? Does he take a romantic, massively humbling pay cut to return to his boyhood club Sporting Lisbon for a farewell tour? Or does he end up at a team like Chelsea? I mean, just imagine it. Imagine new American owner Todd Boehly bringing Ronaldo to Stamford Bridge, handing him an absurd 10-year contract, and trying to force him into Graham Potter's high-pressing, intense system. It would have been pure, unadulterated, documentary-level chaos. We are talking about an absolute comedy timeline that Saudi money either saved us from or tragically robbed us of seeing. Section 4. The anatomy of wasted potential. This brings up a really important question. Why do some players, guys who possess literally all the talent in the world, actively self-sabotage? Well, there is a terrifying anatomy to wasted potential. First, you have inflated egos. These absolutely destroy locker room relationships. They completely alienate head coaches, and they fracture team chemistry beyond repair. Then you have the incredibly dark reality of substance abuse. Look at a player like Adrian Mutu. He joined Chelsea back in 2003, scored 4 goals in his first 3 games, and looked like an absolute world beater destined for greatness in the Premier League. But then, he was hit with a massive ban for cocaine use, initiating a dramatic, unrecoverable downfall that ruined his career. Aside from that, some players simply fail to adapt to modern tactical systems. They rely entirely on their raw, street ball instinct rather than developing their actual football IQ to match the highly structured modern game. And finally, you just have extreme performance fluctuations. You know the type. Players who post one miraculous highlight reel golden boy season and then totally forget how to play the game the very next year. Honestly, there is perhaps no greater, more infamous example of this agonizing self-sabotage than Mario Balotelli. The legendary Jose Mourinho famously summarized it best. He said, "I could write a book of 200 pages of my 2 years at Inter with Mario, but the book would not be a drama, it would be a comedy." And he was so right. Physically and technically, Balotelli had absolutely everything you can ever want in a striker. In his youth, he was genuinely being compared to Messi and Ronaldo. That is how high his ceiling was. But mentally, behind the scenes, top-tier coaches eventually just labeled him totally unmanageable. He was way more concerned with setting off literal fireworks in his own bathroom, throwing darts out of windows at youth players, and creating bizarre off-pitch controversies than maintaining any sort of consistency on the field. The crazy part, the fact that he still managed to win a Premier League title and a Champions League shows you just how insanely, naturally talented he was. But anyone who watched him knows it could have been and absolutely should have been so much more. And if you want to know exactly how bad lifestyle choices can completely rot a locker room culture from the inside out, just look at former Everton goalkeeper Tim Howard's memories of the Dutch winger Royston Drenthe. Drenthe actually came up through the ranks at Real Madrid. He was playing alongside absolute, bona fide legends of the game. He had world-class pedigree written all over him. But when he got to Everton, oh boy. Howard said Drenthe would literally roll into the training complex in a Rolls-Royce, with his shoes completely untied, his eyes half open, and he was constantly unapologetically late to every single team meeting. But the absolute tipping point, the moment that crossed every line, he literally brought his friends into the Everton training ground in the middle of the night to throw a party in the hydrotherapy hot tub. And he was completely oblivious to the security cameras capturing absolutely everything. I mean, it's hilarious in hindsight, sure, but it's also a stark, brutal reminder of how a complete lack of basic professionalism instantly kills a promising career at the highest level of this sport. Section 5. The fragility of greatness. So let's tie this all together. From the squandered, endlessly frustrating potential of players like Balotelli and Drenthe, to the heartbreaking, unavoidable human tragedies of R9 and Adriano, all the way down to the literal inches that separated Kolo Muani from eternal World Cup glory, it leaves us with one lingering, kind of uncomfortable thought. If all-time greatness is truly separated by a single missed penalty, or a referee's blown call in the dying seconds of a match, or a tragically sudden knee injury on a wet pitch, are we actually truly celebrating the best players in history, or are we just celebrating the luckiest? The margins in football are so razor-thin it's scary. Talent is a strict requirement, absolutely. You need it to get in the door. But perfect timing, enduring health, and a massive, massive bit of luck, those are the true architects of a footballing legacy. So what's your biggest football what if? Think about it, debate it, and just realize that the history we know and love today is just one of a million possible outcomes. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the beautiful game.